I never believed that one night could change the course of an entire life, but life has a way of teaching lessons when you least expect them. My story begins in the city, where the days rushed past in endless traffic, deadlines, and constant noise. I had moved there to escape the small town where I was born, carrying with me both memories I wanted to cherish and ones I desperately tried to forget. The city was supposed to give me a new beginning, a place where I could focus only on work and responsibilities without the shadows of the past following me. I was working in a publishing house, editing manuscripts that told stories of other people's dreams, heartbreaks, and journeys, never realizing how much I longed to live a story of my own. He entered my life on a rainy evening, not with fireworks or a dramatic encounter, but with a quietness that felt almost unreal in a city like ours. I was stuck under the awning of a small cafe, trying to shield myself from the downpour, when I noticed him standing just a few feet away. He wasn't a stranger, not really. His face pulled at something inside me, something familiar, something I thought I had left behind in the quiet streets of my childhood town. His name was Ethan, a boy who once lived down the road from me, a boy whose laughter used to echo in the same playground where I spent my summers. Years had passed since then, and the little boy had grown into a man whose presence carried a calm strength. We exchanged the usual words, half disbelief and half laughter at the strangeness of meeting here after all these years. He had moved to the city too, chasing a career in architecture, he said, though his eyes revealed something deeper, as if the city wasn't just a choice but also an escape. We sat inside the cafe that night, watching the rain wash over the streets, and in those hours, it felt as though time folded over itself, bringing the past and present together. We talked about everything, the streets of our childhood, the way the town had changed, the people we once knew, and the things we had lost. For me, it was my father whose sudden passing had broken not only my family but also my sense of safety in the world. For him, it was his mother, who had battled illness for years before finally surrendering to it. Loss has a strange way of creating invisible threads between people. And that night, as we spoke, I felt those threads pulling us closer. I had been carrying my grief quietly, never sharing it with anyone, believing that silence was the only way to survive. But with Ethan, the silence broke. He listened, not with pity, but with an understanding that came from having walked a similar path. When I told him about the emptiness I felt returning home after my father's funeral, how the familiar walls seemed too heavy with memories, he nodded as if he could feel it too. And when he spoke of his mother's final days, the quiet strength she carried even in her pain, I realized how much courage was needed just to love someone knowing you could lose them. Weeks passed after that night, but our paths kept crossing. Sometimes it was planned. Sometimes it felt like fate. We met in bookstores, in coffee shops, even once on the subway when the car was so crowded we had to stand shoulder to shoulder. Each encounter added a layer to something that felt like it had always existed between us, waiting for its time. The city, which once felt so lonely and overwhelming, began to feel smaller, more bearable, because he was there. But our connection wasn't just about comfort. It was about rediscovery. Ethan had this way of reminding me of who I was before the weight of grief bent my shoulders. He remembered the girl who loved writing stories in notebooks, who believed in possibilities, who once told him under a summer sky that dreams mattered. And slowly, with every conversation, he coaxed that girl back out of hiding. I, in turn, reminded him of the boy who used to build castles out of sand and wood, the one who wanted to design not just buildings, but places where people could feel at home. Somewhere between childhood memories and adult responsibilities, we both had lost parts of ourselves, and now, somehow, we were helping each other find them again. It wasn't always smooth. There were days when grief came crashing back, uninvited and heavy. I remember once I broke down while walking through the park with him, because I saw a father teaching his little girl how to ride a bicycle. The image triggered a wave of sorrow so strong I couldn't breathe. Ethan didn't try to shush me or tell me to be strong. He simply stood there, letting me cry, his presence a quiet anchor. Later, he told me how he too would sometimes wake up in the night, hearing his mother's voice in dreams, and how he would sit in the dark until the ache dulled. That honesty, that vulnerability, was the most intimate gift he could give, more than any grand gesture. As the months turned into seasons, our bond deepened, though neither of us named it at first. It wasn't about rushing, it was about healing, and sometimes healing requires patience. We spent holidays together, creating traditions that felt both new and familiar. On New Year's Eve, we stood on a rooftop watching fireworks, and he whispered that he hadn't felt this alive in years. On spring afternoons, we walked along the river, our conversations weaving through dreams and fears and hopes we hadn't dared to voice before. And then came the night. The one that became etched into my heart forever. It was autumn, the air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. Ethan had invited me to an art exhibit where his architectural sketches were being displayed. I went, expecting to see buildings, blueprints, and designs, but what I found was something else. In one corner of the gallery stood a series of drawings of small houses, cozy porches, gardens filled with flowers. They looked like the homes from our childhood town. When I asked him about them, he smiled in a way that softened every edge of the evening. "These are the places I remember," he said quietly. "And the places I want to build. Not skyscrapers, not towers. Just homes that make people feel safe, like they belong." Something inside me shifted then, because I realized that everything he had been doing, all the late nights, all the work, was rooted in the same longing I carried. The longing for a place where love, safety, and belonging could exist despite loss. That night, after the exhibit, we walked out into the chilly air. The city lights shimmered against the dark sky, and as we stood there, he looked at me with a softness that made my chest ache. "You remind me why I still believe in love," he said. It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was enough to unravel the walls I had built around my heart. I felt tears slip down my cheeks, not of sorrow this time, but of recognition, of hope, of love finding its way through the cracks of all that was broken. I reached for his hand, and he held mine as if it were the most natural thing in the world. That was the night he touched my heart. Not with a gesture, not with a promise, but with a truth that changed everything. He showed me that love doesn't erase loss, but it gives us the courage to carry it. Love doesn't heal by pretending the wounds don't exist, but by sitting beside them until they hurt less. From that night on, my life was never the same. The city still rushed, deadlines still loomed, but the weight I carried wasn't crushing anymore. With Ethan, I found not just romance but companionship, understanding.